Now, the camera is arguably one of the most important parts of the filmmaking process because without it, we wouldn't have anything to watch. But if you're picking one for the first time, it can be pretty overwhelming with all the different options out there. So let's figure out which one is the best one for you. Hey everyone, Camber here, showing you how to use your camera to make good videos. So if you're new, consider subscribing. And it's important to remember that the camera is just a tool in the filmmaking process, and going out and buying the most expensive one isn't going to automatically make your videos good. It's learning how to use that camera well to tell a story that's really going to make your videos stand out. And before we get into the various cameras, there's three things to keep in mind, and that is the sensor size, the resolution, and the frame rate. And I've made in-depth videos on all three of these that I'll link down in the description, but for a quick overview, your sensor size is going to determine how well your camera does in lower lighting conditions and also what field of view your lens sees. Your resolution is going to determine whether the footage is HD at 720, Full HD at 1080, or 4K, which is 4 times Full HD. And then there's frame rate, which is normally 24 frames per second in video, and with 60 frames per second or higher, you have the ability to do slow motion. And with that in mind, each of these cameras is going to give you the ability to shoot at 4K at 24 frames per second, Full HD at least 60 frames per second, and all have external microphone inputs. I'm going to compare similar models between Canon and Sony, and some people may ask, what about Panasonic? I do agree they make good cameras, but I'm just not a big fan of the micro 4/3 sensor size. But I'll have links down in the description for the best prices I can find on Amazon for all these cameras. And first up, we have the Canon M50 for $580 and the Sony A6100 for $650. Both cameras have an APS-C size sensor which crops the lens focal length by 1.6 on the M50 and 1.5 on the A6100. The M50 has a Vari-Angle Touchscreen, giving you the ability to see yourself when recording, which is great for vlogging or videos like this. The A6100 also has a touchscreen, but it only tilts 180 degrees. So the problem with this is that when using a microphone, you won't be able to see the screen very well. Both can shoot 4K, but the M50 will crop in on the image by a factor of 1.6, giving you an even narrower field of view. Whereas the A6100 uses the full sensor to actually read out at 6K and then downsample to 4K for recording. The M50 maxes out at 60 frames per second and Full HD, and the A6100 will give you up to 120 frames per second and Full HD for an even slower and smoother slow motion. Both of these are great beginner cameras that are well under $1,000, but if you do have a larger budget to invest in a camera that will really last you for a long time, then the Canon EOS R for $1,500 or the Sony a7 III for $1,800 are both great choices. Both of these cameras have a full frame sensor that will give you much better performance in low light and a shallower depth of field. The EOS R has the same type of Vari-Angle touchscreen as the M50, and the a7 III also has a touchscreen. However, it's only a tilting touchscreen, so you won't have the ability to see yourself when recording. The EOS R also has a crop of 1.8 when shooting 4K, which will almost double the focal length of your lens. The a7 III uses the same 6K to 4K downsampling as the A6100 to get a readout of the full sensor for 4K. The EOS R maxes out at 60 frames per second in Full HD, and the a7 III will give you up to 120 frames per second in Full HD. The EOS R uses a new RF mount for lenses that has a limited range of fairly expensive lenses at the moment, but you can get an adapter to be able to use all of the cheaper Canon EF mount lenses with it. And I've used all these cameras, but I do prefer the Sony cameras just because of the greater flexibility in video settings and button customization, so where you can quickly change settings on the camera. But again, remember that the camera is just a tool in the filmmaking process, and it's the skills you learn and how to use that tool to tell a good story that'll really set your films apart. So regardless of which camera you choose, just make sure to practice with it every day so you can learn how to shape those shots and make them flow to tell a better story. And if this video is helpful, please help me out by leaving a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you soon.